All right. For Dr. Feldman's expertise is not only the reflect in his impressive achievement, but also in his dedication to bridging the gap between the hard and side of mentoring system. He has conducted extensive research on the barrier and facilitators for the quality depression care for medical patients. Further highlight his commitment to historic and patient-centered healthcare also. Okay, and for the lecture today is in the title of the Heart and Side of Mentoring, the UCSF Faculty Mentoring Program. Um, okay, in order to save the time, I invite Dr. Mitchell to talk with you. Thank you.
We'll have a couple of hours today to, mostly I'm going to focus on giving you an overview of kind of the mentoring program that we've developed at UCSF. I'll tell you a little bit about my university. I think unless you're in the medical field, UCSF is not quite as well known. We don't have a football team or basketball team. It's all graduate health sciences. So some of you, how many of you are familiar with UCSF? So I'm going to tell you about the university in a moment. I thought that would be the case. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about our mentoring program and what I've created there over the last 10 to 15 years and working on a mentoring program for faculty at UCSF that has really become a model for the country. And I've been in China and Switzerland and Japan and then all over the US talking about mentorship. So I'm very happy to be here in Thailand. It's been here for 1 week, and it's been a really wonderful week with everything's wonderful except the weather. A little bit too hot for me, but and I hear it gets hotter. But so we'll have a couple of hours today, and this is, I'm not going to be lecturing the whole time. I think the goal was to have kind of workshop style. So there'll be a kind of a fun activity today. And because we have, hopefully most of you can be with me for 6 hours. I think 2 hours today and then 2 hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think, of next week. We'll have time to kind of take our time to work our way through. Usually when I go to Peking Union Medical College Hospital and teach this course, it's 4 full days. So even 6 hours is going to be a little bit shorter, but it's enough time to really, as we say in English, you kind of sink your teeth into it. I don't know if you have the same expression. So I look forward to it, but what I want to make sure is that it's interactive. Okay, I get really tired of I talk for 6 hours. So I want you to feel very comfortable just raising your hand, stopping me, asking a question along the way. Okay, it makes it much more, I think, fun and interesting for everybody. The other thing is that I've been very, very impressed by the English language capacity here in Thailand. But I know it's for most of you, probably your second language, maybe even your third language, I don't know. So if I'm speaking too quickly or using vocabulary that's not familiar, please stop me, raise your hand. Or if your brain is getting tired of thinking in English, let me know that you need a break, okay? Sometimes I can tell because people are looking tired, but just remind me that, we need a break, and we'll take a break, okay? Any questions before I start? Or go on? I guess I've started. All right. And the title's kind of unusual, so we'll get into sponsorship in a couple of days. I probably won't talk much about that today, but over the past, I'd say, year and a half, I have focused a bit more of my efforts on this new concept of sponsorship. And it's not a familiar concept even in mostly in the US either, but I think it's an important complement in thinking about mentoring. So I wanted to make sure that we integrated in this new concept of sponsoring or sponsorship as we talk about mentorship. But today we're really going to focus on mentoring. Okay. So when it comes, we'll have you complete the pre-course assessment. Maybe during the break. Hopefully it'll come soon. So I had a kind introduction, so you already kind of know my personal history. Just, I started off life as an anthropologist. In the U.S., we have, this system of education where you spend 4 years as an undergraduate, and I was actually in graduate school at Cambridge in England, and then in the United States studying anthropology. And then I decided to become a doctor. And so that's possible in the U.S. where you can change career course. I mean, I was still only in my 20s, so not so old, but I had a lot of education already. But my perspective as a social behavioral scientist still, I think, is how I approach also thinking about mentorship, as you'll see. And you've already heard about my background. In addition to my work in mentorship, I've done work in mental health and kind of mostly research in depression and anxiety disorders in medical patients, because I'm a medical doctor, not a psychiatrist or psychologist. But in the U.S., much of the many mental health issues are diagnosed and treated in the medical setting. And then on a personal level, I'm actually married. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. They're all grown up. My son's a doctor also, and my daughter's a social worker. And she has 2 children, so I have 2 grandchildren. And they're incredibly cute. And if you have a few hours, I can show you some photographs. All right. So I thought I'd start just by also sharing with you, since this is about mentorship, for me to reflect on the influence and the impact of mentors on my own career and my own professional development. And I think maybe on Tuesday, I'll give you an opportunity to also reflect on that for yourself also. But I had a number of people who, and when looking back, I realize in retrospect, they were my mentors. When I was training and getting my degrees, we didn't use the term mentorship or mentoring. But in looking back, I wish we did, because I also would have appreciated more the support I was getting from all of these wonderful professors, and some of whom are now very old. She was very young when I was working with her, Dr. Martin at Johns Hopkins. And she got me interested in the intersection between anthropology and health. So probably it was the beginning of my thinking, maybe I want to go into the medical field. Not really conscious thinking at the time. And I've not been back in touch with her, and I really have to do that. I have not talked to her in many decades, but she's still doing work. Dr. Lewis is an MD, PhD, so I studied medical anthropology with him. So influenced me even more to try to think about how do we integrate health into kind of the thought about kind of health, culture, and behavior. And he just recently passed away, and I so regret not getting back in touch with him. So it's sort of a reminder to all of you to think about who your mentors are and to make sure you stay in touch with them and maybe you thank them or give them appreciation for how they've influenced you. Don't want to wait until you're my age, and then maybe it's too late. This gentleman basically hired me at UCSF. He was the head of the department and pretty famous in the U.S. in terms of health policy work. And then he was president of a very large foundation, and then he came back to the university. And now, many years later, I'm his boss. And so I'm head of the department that he's now back in. He's 80 years old, so he's semi-retired. But it's an interesting evolution from him being my mentor and my boss, still my mentor, but I'm now his boss, technically. I don't really boss him around, but, but he's in my department. And so, as you continue to grow in your own careers, these mentoring relationships evolve, often from mentor-mentee to peers, to maybe then it switches. And now he asks for my support for things because I have kind of access and influence that he no longer has. So it was a little uncomfortable for me at first because I still saw him as a mentor and he's very senior to me. And yet institutionally our roles have changed. And so that also is interesting to navigate in thinking about the evolution of our professional relationships and our mentoring relationships. And then Dr. Coates is why I first came to Thailand, because he's an expert in HIV/AIDS and prevention, and health and behavior and prevention. He's a psychologist, and basically founded the Center for AIDS Prevention Studies in San Francisco at UCSF. And 25 years ago, I flew to Chiang Mai for a 2-day conference on HIV/AIDS and then flew home. So I never really saw Thailand or anything. It was kind of crazy. But he introduced me to that, and he mentored me very early in my career in a very concrete way. I knocked on his door and said, I'm very interested in health and behavior. And at the time, there was HIV/AIDS epidemic was very high in San Francisco. This is 25 years ago. And he said, okay, I'm going to support your time 1 day a week, and I'm going to give you an office to go to. I was mostly doing clinical work at the time in the university. And he said, write a grant. You have 1 year to write a grant and get some funding. So that's what I did. And it completely changed my career and my trajectory. So I'm very grateful to him, and I have been in touch with him as well. So, and this is another mentor I had as a anthropology student. So all of that just to kind of maybe illustrate through my own career journey, which I suspect I'm a little bit older than most of you, the evolution of your mentoring relationships, and to be maybe more thoughtful about them when they're occurring. Because for me, it wasn't really anything we talked about or thought about. And I could have gotten even more out of those relationships if I had really thought of these people truly as my mentors. So, I wasn't sure how large a group we were going to be. It may take us a long time to have everybody introduce themselves. But since we're going to be spending 6 hours together, I'd love to kind of get to know you all some. So how do we do this? I mean, even if it's 2 minutes each, it'll take us half an hour just to get through introductions. Not practical. So maybe over the course of the next few days, when you have a comment or a question, if you could please, tell me your name. It's helpful. I know it seems like most Thai people have a nickname. And maybe you can, if you don't mind, maybe during the break we can take up some paper, and do a little tent thing, and maybe write your nickname or a name on there that I can use, because I'd love to use your name. And I'm sure I won't remember if you just tell me. So if you would write that down, that would be very helpful for me, and we can do that during the break, and we can ask for some paper. I'm wondering, maybe we can just do one of these questions or two, just by raising hand if you feel comfortable speaking up. Just what experience do you have already being a mentor? And what questions do you have? Is there, why are you here today? What are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to get out of the next couple of days? And I hope you weren't forced to be here. I assume you're all here. I know you're all really busy. I'm sure you have lots of other things you could be doing. So I'm curious about what you're hoping to get out of the next couple of days with me. So anybody willing to, and do we have another microphone? I don't know if we need it. Thank you. Is there another mic? Thank you so much. Yeah. I think that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay, thank you for volunteering to go first. I appreciate it.
Yeah. My name is Nana Pat. I'm currently working in the Department of Epidemiology. It takes confidence to accept that I have very low knowledge about the mentor. And the things that I'm looking forward to for today's sections, I'm looking forward to the how to match mentors and mentee together, and the supportive environments. And
I'm sorry, what?
Yep.
The second, you said matching and
the supportive environment.
supportive.
Yeah, about the process to
Okay.
develop the mentorings. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks.
You know, I'd love, maybe later
Yeah.
we can get
Are there anyone next?
a chart so I can write these things down.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
that's why I'm attending your
Yeah,
class.
thank you.
Yep.
So the matching and support, and anybody else be willing to let me know what you're hoping, what your experience is as a mentor, and what your goals may be in the next couple of days. We need one or two more people to, as we say, break the ice. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Malini from Department Behavioral Science, and today I want to know how is the system about mentoring system when you decide that have to align with the learning theory or not. That show the achievement to our student. Okay, I want to know clear about the mentoring system.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
So that's a great question because very shortly I'll go over the system we set up at my university. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm sure there'll be more questions along the way. This is the third kind of workshop and lecture I've done already here in Thailand. So I'm getting an idea of kind of a little bit more about the culture and relationships. And I was at the medical school, and then yesterday I was at the main campus with biology professor and English, and it was very interesting, very mixed group. But thank you. So matching, support, and kind of the system. I think these are three issues so far. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Varapan from a nutrition department.
Nutrition, okay.
Yes. I question about sponsoring or sponsorship. This is related only for the like a financial something.
Yeah.
Or it can be linked with the other,
Right.
like a support activity, something like that.
Right, yeah.
And another thing that it should be like a extra question for me. What are differences between mentoring, coaching, counseling, sponsoring, supervising, something like that?
Yeah.
I would like to know differences.
Great.
Thank you.
Great questions, and I promise you I will cover all of that. Yeah. Good. But when I do cover it, it's still not clear, of course, we continue to talk. I will say sponsoring is not about, it could be, but mostly not about financial support. Yeah. It goes beyond that. And like mentorship, it actually a concept derived more from the business world. And like mentorship actually was quite well developed in the business community well before we integrated into academia. So when I was starting the mentoring program, I was reading the Harvard Business Review. That's the journal I usually don't read, kind of the main business journal, right? But that's where all the literature was. There were no articles in the literature from the health field or public health field or nursing, medicine on mentoring. Now if you put a search into Google Scholar, or you will find thousands of articles on mentoring. So over the last 10 to 20 years, there's been a huge change. But now sponsorship, very few articles. If you look under sponsorship, you'll find one written by me and maybe 10 other papers. I mean, very few, but there will be more and more. And we'll get into that a bit more later. Okay, thank you. The back row volunteered. Thanks so much. So, whoops, uh-oh. Not sure what I did, but I won't do it again. So these are just some key learning objectives. And of course, I'll make sure to cover everything that you just mentioned in terms of matching, support, system, and sponsoring, and the difference between sponsoring, coaching, counseling, etc. And I'm sure there are other questions as well that we'll get to, but thank you for bringing those up. So, I'm hoping that this will help you think about what are the gaps in your knowledge and skills. You all have that little questionnaire that I'll give you some time in a little bit to fill out, but that will get at getting you think a little bit about your own confidence level, to learn some core mentoring knowledge and skills. Of course, I want to enhance your skills. And, 6 hours together is not a lot of time, but hopefully by the end you'll have some more confidence and some more skills you can draw on. And then over time, right, how do we get better on anything we practice? And so you practice and you continue to use the skills. Yeah, and then we're going to learn about sponsorship as well, and how does it differ from mentorship. So because none of you seem to know anything about the institution I come from, I want to tell you a little bit about UCSF. If you were medical doctors, you'd all know very well, but because the School of Public Health, for historical reasons, is at UC Berkeley, and the medical center is at UCSF, it's kind of an unusual arrangement. That, of course, has to do with politics and, all this boring stuff. So UCSF is, of course, how many of you have been to San Francisco? Few of you. So more of you must come, because it's a nice place to visit. And if for those of you who are there, I live over here. The city is here. Of course, that's the Golden Gate Bridge. We have the redwood trees and Muir Woods. We have the famous cable car, San Francisco. And then this is supposedly the most crooked street in the world. I don't know if that's true, but it's very crooked, Lombard Street. So UCSF is exclusively a graduate health sciences campus, and we do patient care and research. It's among the top 5 hospitals in the U.S. So as said, if you were doctors, you would have heard of it, but people outside of medicine, it's not familiar to you. And what I'm very proud of at UCSF is that we're in the top 5 in both research and primary care. So there's a focus on taking care of patients and community health, as well as very high-powered research and quaternary care, very high-tech medical research and care. So it's kind of unusual because it's a public university, but more like Stanford or Harvard in terms of the research and the other things that we do. So again, and there's schools of dentistry, medicine, nursing, and pharmacy, as well as graduate programs at UCSF, but no undergraduates. They're all graduate students, either undergraduate we call medical students, or resident training, or fellows and postdocs, or PhD researchers. So there's a lot of research that goes on, and we're the top recipient of funding from the National Institutes of Health. I was trying to understand how you all get funded here to do your research. It's very different. And in the U.S., most medical research, health services research, is funded by NIH, and it's a very competitive process to get funding from NIH. You can write a very, very good grant and get a very, very good score and not get funding because they only have a certain amount of funding. So that it's challenging. It's hard to have a research career. Whoops. And then in terms of the scientific discoveries, there are 5 Nobel Prize scientists over the years at UCSF. And this gentleman, Dr. Bishop, he and Varmus discovered oncogenes, which was a very fundamental and important discovery back probably, 1989. But he also was the chancellor, kind of the president of the university, and came up with the idea of surveying faculty about mentoring and created the mentoring program, or asked me to create the mentoring program. So while he was a very high-powered scientist, also recognized the importance of mentoring to support faculty at the university. So of course I think he's visionary because he really led the university's commitment to mentoring program well before any other of our peer institutions were doing that. Prusner with prions, Dr. Blackburn, who's a very nice lady. And actually, the interesting story about Elizabeth Blackburn is that she won the Nobel Prize with her mentee. So it was work that she and a postdoc in her lab did together. Her postdoc is now a faculty member at Johns Hopkins. But this Nobel Prize was given to mentor and mentee, which I think is a really cool story. And this was around the telomerase, which is kind of that key role in cell aging. And then Dr. Yamanaka is both at Kyoto University and at UCSF, and we both claim him. But he spends half the year in each institution. I'll skip that. We're also committed to a public mission, which is what I really appreciate about the university. It's not just research, clinical care, but really takes care of the public mission as well. And then my division is the Division of General Internal Medicine. We have a training program. We have about 70 faculty. If you want to know more, you can go to my website and then what we do, public health and health services research. So there's a lot of tobacco control, tobacco research, smoking research, community-based participatory projects as well. So a lot of the research that goes on in my division probably be very familiar to many of you. And we've started, although the U.S. is a fairly wealthy country, we have a lot of health inequity. And we started what we call a food pharmacy. So we provide food to patients who don't have healthy food, who don't have enough resources to eat well. And so we see food as medicine, right, and provide food to patients who need it. All right, so let me tell you some about the mentoring program, the mentoring system at UCSF, a little bit about the history and some about the structure of the program. And I just start with this quote because and this quote for me illustrates the idea that having a mentoring system, a mentoring program, is not just a nice thing to do. It's essential if you want to be a successful, vibrant academic community. So I think at the beginning it was like, it would be nice to have a mentoring program, but we don't need it. People are going to do their work anyway. They'll be successful anyway. There's so much research and literature now that shows that mentoring, that having an organized, structured, formal mentoring system and program has many important benefits, outcomes for faculty, productivity, faculty satisfaction, improved recruitment and retention of faculty, and I'll go over some of the research on that later. But it's no longer a nicety. It's really expected now in an organization's culture. And I mentioned I first started training as an anthropologist. So my goal for you here in public health, MUPH, would be to create a culture of mentorship.